How could you sleep with that monster? One of the victims of my husband, Pablo Escobar, asked me. Were you a victim or an accomplice? Why didn't you do anything? Why didn't you leave him? Why didn't you turn him in? Those questions are probably ones that thousands of people have wondered. The answer is because I loved him. And while many may find that response inadequate, the truth is that the reason I remained by his side till the end of his life, even though I disagreed with his actions and decisions innumerable times. I met Pablo Escobar when I was just 12 years old, and he was 23. He was the first and only love of my life. I married him in the church, believing that marriage vows are to be honored. I was raised in a male chauvinistic culture in which women were taught to follow their husbands without questioning. I grew up being molded by Pablo to be his wife and the mother of his children, not to ask questions or challenge his choices, to look the other way. I finished high school after having my first child, and from then on my life revolved around my husband until the day he died. I endured affairs, insults, humiliations, lies, loneliness, raids, death threats, terrorist attacks, kidnapping attempts on my children, and even long periods of confinement and exile. All for love. Of course, there were many moments when I wondered whether I should keep going, but I wasn't able to leave him, not just because of love, but also out of fear, powerlessness, and uncertainty about what would become of my children and me without him. I was even afraid that the most dangerous man in Colombia might hurt me if I left him. In 1984, when our situation had become immensely complicated after the assassination of the Minister of Justice, Rodrigo Lara Bonilla, on Pablo's orders, and during the 9 years that followed, I lived in terror. Pablo showed complete disregard for the consequences of his actions, much less for their effects on his own family. His senseless frenzy of activity left no room for any questioning or criticism, and I lacked the strength necessary to leave him, even when many others did. Every single day in the late 1980s and early 1990s was a life or death matter for all Colombians. All of us were held hostage by my husband's war, and escaping the brutality unleashed by Pablo was our biggest challenge. One night, in 1988, a car loaded with 1,500 pounds of dynamite exploded outside our front door while we were sleeping. It marked the beginning of a fierce narco-terrorist war, with us as the main target of my husband's enemies. Miraculously, we survived, but from that point on, we had no choice but to heed Pablo's decisions on how, when, and where to move around. By the time I realized how far removed I'd become from the brutal reality around us, it was too late. I was very young, naive, and blind to reality, and so I succumbed. I was often quite comfortable, but it was always comfort born out of the ignorance that comes with having no right to look, think, decide, choose, or question. The last period of Pablo's life was a very lonely one. He was surrounded by many men, but few friends. Thanks to his unfettered greed and ambition, he lost control of everything. He did all his own thinking and planning. He took over our lives and violently took the life of anything that crossed him. I wasn't strong enough to confront him, though I often rebuked him for his actions. He never listened. The lives of myself and my family were utterly transformed after his death. I found myself forced to negotiate with his enemies, coordinate a settlement with the Colombian government, legally change our identities, look for a country to take us in, and figure out how to take care of my children and my daughter-in-law. My love for them revealed strength I never knew I had, which allowed me to do things I'd never imagined. But I also realized that no matter what we did, my children and I would continue to be identified as Pablo Escobar's family and would carry all sorts of social stigmas to our graves. My son, Juan Pablo Escobar, today Sebastián Marroquín, decided to show his face to the world in 2009 with the documentary Sins of My Father, in which he asked for forgiveness for Pablo's crimes. In publishing his books, Pablo Escobar, My Father, and Pablo Escobar Infraganti, he strove to tell our story with the sole aim of preventing our experiences from ever being repeated. My son's courage inspired me to follow in his footsteps, and with his help, I too decided to offer an account of all the things I felt and experienced back then.